classroom if you're not already doing it. So I'm introducing Erin. She is an award-winning educator, national keynote speaker, author, and mother. Her recent publication, Amazing Grades, was a collaboration with experts from 13 countries around the world. Erin is a 2014 recipient of a Immaculate Pre-K-12 Teacher of the Year Award for Michigan. Erin was recognized as the ISTE 2012 social media influencer, so you must follow her on Twitter. And she currently teaches at Cranbrook Elementary School. Her work can be found on her award-winning educational blog, kleinspiration.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at Klein-Erin. Okay, welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am super excited to share one of my absolute favorite sessions with you, sharing the student voice. This is such a passionate topic to me because it truly is centered around the kids. And this is my little guy, Jacob. He's 6, and isn't he cute? So he is the reason, he and my daughter both, Riley, are the reason why I do what I do. I was in interior design prior to going into teaching, and once I had my daughter, Riley, I realized that teaching was definitely the path that I wanted to go on. So becoming a teacher really is the world to me because every kid in my classroom is somebody else's entire world, and they deserve my very best because that's absolutely what I want for my Jacob and Riley. So what I realize in my classroom, when I start thinking about the way that I structure my lessons and the way that I deliver the content to the kids, I really start thinking about, am I recognizing kids for getting the right answers or for really asking great questions? And I know, like many of you, there's so much on our plates that there are days where you just feel like you're an autopilot, just going through the curriculum. And you, for our grade level, I teach 2nd grade currently, I've taught middle school as well. But we're expected to be very similar or on the same page for each of us. There are 4 at our grade level. And if one's going too fast, then they are expected to slow down, or we're expected to speed up. But we know that our kids are very different in each of the classrooms, and our styles as teachers are different. And so when I really started thinking about what type of classroom did I want for my kids, I'm teaching Unit 3 in math, Lesson 8, and I'm going to do the math message followed by the minute math, and then section 1, 2, and 3, and then we're done, and then tomorrow I do the same thing. And that's absolutely not what I want. I don't want to sit in front of the classroom board and just deliver content to the children and expect that they're going to get it, because that's definitely not what I want the experience for my own 2 kids to have. So I want them to be curious. I want them to really think about them. And when I think about how much curiosity is embedded into my classroom during the school day, into our classroom for the kids, there wasn't a lot. We have Rebecca Sitton spelling. We have, well, actually, I just switched to Zaner Bloser. We have a curriculum for writing. We have everyday math. We have handwriting without tears. We have a guided reading program that we're doing. So there's so much throughout the day that it really feels most days just like I'm a deliverer of content. Like, this is my script, this is what I do. It was very robotic, and I wasn't having as much fun as I was before, and I certainly know that the kids weren't. So I really started to think, what message was that sending to my children about their learning experience and about them truly taking ownership of their experiences? And I stepped back and I talked to my grade level team, we talked to the administrative team, and together as a whole, our school is really going in a different direction to really foster and nurture that sense of creativity and student passion. And it's been just a tremendous journey that we've taken. And the school that I'm currently at, we used to do the Basel type for reading, and then for writing, it was very much prompt driven. Now we're a complete workshop model school to where we don't teach a writing curriculum, we don't teach a reading curriculum, we teach the reader and we teach the writer. So we're really growing independence for kids, and we're meeting them exactly where they are individually and then growing that from there. So we're listening to their questions, we're fostering that level of creativity. We have stopped in our school talking so much and really letting the kids have a stronger voice in the classroom. And it's a joy, truly a joy, to be in the class every day, to listen to their insights. And they fuel so much inspiration in us. So it's interesting too when I think about my own two kids and what message we're really sending about curiosity and when that kind of starts with kids. And I found the next book to be, so I'll go ahead and read a little bit of it to you, keeping in mind like what message we truly send about curiosity. So this is George. He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. The man with a big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but, oh, what happened first? This, and then this. Man overboard, the sailors cried as they threw him a life belt. George caught it and held on. At last, he was safe on board. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun! Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen jumped to the fire engines and on the hook and ladders. Ding dong, everyone out of the way! Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire, only a naughty little monkey. Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but they caught him in the telephone wire, and poor curious George went to jail for being curious. So I'm like, what kind of subliminal messages truly are we sending to kids? So I really started kind of doing some action research projects within my own classroom and really studying what other schools were doing on fostering that level of creativity in kids. And 20% time, genius hour, differentiation, personalized learning, and really just finding out how are we taking kids' questions and their curiosities and really celebrating that and kind of shaping our curriculum around the kids. And I found the next TED Talk very, very inspiring and insightful, and I'll just share a segment of that with you. Oh, you know what? I've got to plug in the sound really quickly. It would be helpful for you guys to hear it.
The trust for these little children to be able to ask questions, not only when they're 3 and 4 years old, but when they're 14 years old and 24 years old and 44 years old. So the point is the following. These little children grow up, they're full of questions. No matter where I go in the world, no matter where you go in the world, they ask 1,000 questions. And when they go into school systems, sometimes it disappears, but before then, they question everything. Now that's important. If there's one gift I could give to any child in the world is to remember that phrase, question everything. And the reason why is because when Clayton Christensen, who authored The Innovator's DNA, and Jeff Dyer with me, when we interviewed people like Jeff Bezos at Amazon, the founder of Amazon, or Nicholas Zenstrom, who founded Skype, or Pierre Omidyar, who founded eBay, all of them basically questioned the world. And this is the way in which they were able to disrupt and change the world. And interestingly, they all had some adult in their life when they were younger who paid attention to their questions.
So I love that, being that adult to really truly pay attention to the questions that my kids have. And I will be very honest with you, there are many times throughout the day where I'm telling the kids, hold on, not right yet, hold on, I gotta tell you this, or in a minute, and I'm silencing their voice when yet they're just wanting to extend the lesson and dig deeper. And that's what we want from kids. But so often I felt like I was just on this treadmill, just going and going, and not kids have a voice in the classroom because I had to get through the curriculum. I had to make sure it was checked off my list. But really that wasn't the learning experience that I desired so much to have. Really thinking about if my kids were asking those curious questions. The creativity crisis from Newsweek was really, it kind of hit home with me. Have the kids stopped asking questions because they've lost interest? Or have they lost interest in an answer-driven school system that doesn't allow them to ask enough questions? There's been a lot of research on the type of questioning, bless you, that kids ask throughout the day. And in elementary school, what these studies have shown is that kids are asking really insightful questions, really deep. They wonder about everything around them. And as children progress through the grade levels, the types of questioning that they're really doing is this for grade? Where do I put my name? You. And those aren't obviously the types of questions that we want to ask. So really thinking about how do we not let kids lose sight of this very at the root of what they want to learn and really to be curious learners. So the Marshmallow Challenge, have you guys seen this before? Anybody watched the full TED Talk? It's fabulous. We're just going to watch like a minute and a half of it.
Since then, I've conducted about 70 design workshops across the world with students and designers and architects, even the CTOs of the Fortune 50. And there's something about this exercise that reveals very deep lessons about the nature of collaboration, and I'd like to share some of them with you. So, normally, most people begin by orienting themselves to the task. They talk about it, they figure out what it's going to look like, they jockey for power, then they spend some time planning. They sketch in, they lay out spaghetti. They spend the majority of their time assembling the sticks into ever-growing structures. And then finally, just as they're running out of time, someone takes out the marshmallow, and then they gingerly put it on top, and they stand back, and ta-da! They admire their work. But what really happens most of the time is that the ta-da turns into an uh-oh, because the weight of the marshmallow causes the entire structure to buckle and to collapse. So there are a number of people who have a lot more uh-oh moments than others. And among the worst are recent graduates of business school. It's amazing. They lie, they cheat, they get distracted, and they produce really lame structures. And of course, there's teams that have a lot more ta-da structures. And among the best are recent graduates of kindergarten. And it's pretty amazing, as Peter tells us. Not only do they produce the tallest structures, but they're the most interesting structures of them all. So the question you want to ask is, how come? Why? What is it about them? And Peter likes to say that none of the kids spend any time trying to be CEO of Spaghetti Inc., right? They don't spend time jockeying for power. But there's another reason as well. And the reason is that business students are trained to find the single right plan, right? And then they execute on it. And then what happens is when they put the marshmallow on top, they run out of time, and what happens? It's a crisis. Sound familiar, right? Okay. What kindergartners do differently is that they start with the marshmallow and they build prototypes, successive prototypes, always keeping the marshmallow on top. So they have multiple times to fix it.
So I actually share that clip with my students in the classroom towards the beginning of the year when we're setting up our routines and our procedures. And I really want them to understand that the kindergartners, fantastic example. And these kids are grade 2. They're 6 and 7 years old, and some turning 8. And I want them to know how important they are and how much of a voice they can have and how I want them to fail, because otherwise I can't teach them. Like, that's an opportunity for me to get to share in their learning experience and really foster that with them, and really just keeping in mind what I want for my own kids. So when I share that with my kids at the beginning of the year, we talk about failing, and it's, you know, the big ugly F word, and they're like, no, we can't fail, we always have to win, and that's the mindset that these children have. But I share with them, you know, it's your first attempt in learning, F-A-I-L, and that's how we learn most. And so we start sharing experiences that they've had where they haven't really been successful this time, and we get really comfortable with that idea of perseverance and really having stamina to do something, or grit. And we talk about what it means to overcome challenges and how much intrinsically better you feel once you have overcame something and learned from it, rather than just things coming easy to you. And we talk about how that plays into boredom and engagement. And we talk about all of these big ideas at the beginning of the year. So I want them to know that I am recognizing them for asking those great questions and not just getting the right answer. Because when children are afraid to, you know, give an answer in class or raise their hand or participate or whatever it is, they're not really thinking about, you know, getting it right. They're just wanting to contribute. I want for my kids, for Riley and for Jacob. And I'm not sure why that skipped there. Let me skip ahead. So sorry about that. So when I talk about all of these ideas with my children, I started in the middle school teaching, well, I started in first grade, and then I went to the middle school teaching grade 6 and 7. And when I work with my kids, my evolution with them was to move more of the lecture, deliver of content, to more of a facilitator, you know, that typical guide on the side that we hear about. So I wanted them to have voice in the curriculum, and I had this incredible opportunity to teach a class. It was an elective. What happened at the middle school was they had overbooked all the specials classes, and they had this one class in particular that they didn't have enough seats for the kids. It was a computer typing class. And so my principal approached me and he said, "Hey Klein, we really need an extra teacher to give up her plan time. Of course you'll get compensated for it, and would you?" I said, "Sure, can I teach whatever class I want?" And he was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Can I make up the special, or are you going to tell me what I have to teach?" And he said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" So I said, "Well, let me think about it, and then I'll get back to you. And if you like the idea, then sure, I'll do it." So I started talking to the students, and I said, "Guys, if you could have any class, like what type of class would you want?" And it was really interesting, the feedback that I got. They said, "We just want a class where we can read. You guys always want us to read like 20 or 30 minutes at night, and we have, this SSR time or drop everything and read time, but that's not enough, and you can't just time read and then expect us to read on demand, and we want to read what we want to read. We don't want to be told what we have to read." So that's the type of feedback that I got, and I said, "Well, let's just make a book club, and you guys can do just that." And they loved the idea, and I loved it. So I went to my principal and I said, "I've got the idea, it's book club." And he said, "Well, what types of things are you going to do in book club, and what resources do you need?" And I said, we don't need anything. We just need kids, that's it. And we're just going to talk about books." And it was fantastic. And my kids realized that their love for literature was really grown in that class. And I was really inspired by Rafe Esquith. And if you've not read this book, I highly recommend it. There are no shortcuts. And he talks about life is not easy. It does take perseverance, and it isn't always the easiest thing to do. And one of the aspects he talks about in his book, he taught 5th grade, he talks about getting the kids really invested in classical literature. And he takes them to operas and to plays, and he does all of this with his high poverty students and really gets them to have an appreciation for art and culture. And the demographic really spoke to me of the school that he taught in. So I said that I should see if my kids would start picking up on their own classical literature and really doing that close reading of it and really digging deeper into some of the philosophies in it. So this was a few years ago, and Twilight was all the rave in the middle school, and you were either Team Edward or Team Jacob, no matter who you were. And I was a big fan of it myself. In fact, I named my 2 cats that I have, Bella and Edward, true story. So I read all the books, Team Edward, and the kids loved it, and we got to talk about it. And I said, "Guys, have you ever heard of Wuthering Heights?" And they all said no, they had not heard of that book before. And I said, "Oh my gosh, it's really, really similar to the book Eclipse." And they're like, "Oh," they all wanted to read it. So I said, "Well, what if I could get enough copies and we can just kind of read it together?" They loved it. So I went back to my principal and we got enough copies for the book. And so we just started to read it in class. And I kind of helped them through it, and we talked about it, and we really got into the characters. And if you're familiar with this story, you know the character development is really kind of twisted, and it's really interesting. But the kids were getting involved and getting invested. And what I found was some of them were going home and talking and exchanging ideas and reading ahead, and then coming back to the class and being like, "Oh, Mrs. Klein, you're not going to believe what happens today when you read." And I'm like, "Did you read it at home ahead?" And so they're like, "Yeah, we couldn't wait." And I couldn't get my kids to do this on their own ever, and now they're doing it just independently because on classical literature, and I was so impressed just by their motivation to do this. And I had to, per the district, show some sort of assessment for the class. So I said, well, I wanted it to be project-based. And at the time, I didn't know much about project-based type learning, so I did kind of give them options instead of choice, but I did let them pick which type of project. So I created a document, and I put it on our website, and I said, you guys can either create a movie and kind of make a script and really reenact like Wuthering Heights and talk about the parallels of Emily Bronte's work to Stephanie Meyer and compare the books and the characters. Or if you don't want to do a film, you could create a floor plan and you can maybe draw maps of the city and do Thrush-Cross Grange and where the characters lived in Twilight and compare those. Or you could maybe create a website and host information for people to find out and really explain in detail. So then the kids said, well, can we make a movie and do the floor plan, and can we just put it all on the website? And I was like, that's a great idea. So now these kids intrinsically were going above and beyond the expectations that I ever even set for them. They created beautiful websites filled with lots of information, and it was a really great portfolio assessment piece for them to have in their body of work. And I didn't have to teach the technology at all. They just intrinsically went home and figured out how to do it all, and it was fantastic. We finished with Wuthering Heights, and the kids said, what book are we going to do next? And I said, do you guys want to read independently of your choice books? Or they said, no, we really liked reading together and book. So I said, well, you guys figure it out, talk about it, and whatever book you guys decide on, I'll see if we can get copies of it. That was turned down because of the budget, so I had to read aloud. And so the book that the kids came up with, I actually had to get permission for. This is the book, A Child Called It. And who's familiar with this book? Oh my gosh, heart-wrenching, right? Very difficult to read. It's one of those books about first-person narrative, so I couldn't read anymore because I was literally in tears, but I couldn't put the book down either, and my heart was breaking for the character in the story. So one of the children suggested the book, and I was familiar immediately as soon as he said it, but he wanted to read it because his mom was reading it. And he didn't know what it was about, but he always saw her in it, and she wasn't really a reader, so he said, it must be good. So I said, well, let me see if we can read it, and I have to get permission. And then, of course, the kids are like, why do you have to get permission? Like, now we really want to read this book. So I said, all right. So my principal is just like, yeah, he wasn't familiar with the book. Yes. So we got to read it. And we cried together. So much came out of this class. If you're familiar with the country song, Alyssa Lies, we would listen to songs in class that inspired us, just making connections with the book that we were reading. Alyssa Lies is a country song about a little girl who lies when she goes to school, about the bruises and about the markings on her body. And then finally, towards the end of the song, spoiler alert, Alyssa lies in heaven now. So when we played that song in class, I shared it right before lunch because that's when the class was. And of course, to see the video on the smart board, the lights were off in the classroom, and when I flipped the lights on to go to lunch, every single child, boy and girl, was just sobbing. Not only just because the song was sad, but because they had such a connection to the character in the story, and it meant something. Like, they understood the lyrics to the song. So, and then of course they said, Mrs. Klein, we don't like you. Like, I can't believe you did this right before lunch. Now we have to go to lunch and we're crying. And they said, turn the lights back off. So we got our faces cleaned up and we passed around some tissues, and then they went to lunch. But we really started talking about real ideas in our world, and we really connected. And I'll tell you, teaching class, going to teach them in language arts, I co-taught with another person, and some of the children that I had that I worked with, I did a lot of intervention work, and my Tier 2 and my Tier 3 kids, those in the red kids, they were so much more invested in language arts now because of that relationship that I built with these kids. And that's truly what it comes down to. And the famous quote, children don't know how much, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It really resonated with me because my children were so much more willing to do anything that I asked, and I was more willing to listen to them and to share their ideas. And they wanted to volunteer. They were so empowered by this story that they said, what can we do? We have to do something else. And I said, well, let's figure it out. One of the girls, her mom volunteered at the Catherine Cobb Center. It's a battered shelter for women and children. And it just so happened to be in Adrian, Michigan, where I was teaching. I wasn't even aware of it. And they said, can we go there? Can we do something? And I said, well, what would we do? The center, and they said, you guys are welcome to come. You can read to the children. We got to make Valentines with them. We got to dye Easter eggs with the kids. And I did have to get permission from my principal. We signed up after school. I put a list up, and any of the kids who wanted to volunteer, I had to get waivers signed. I just brought them in my car, and we went to the Catherine Cobb Center. It was supposed to just be like once a week. It ended up being 3 times a week. The kids, they had to rotate because I had so many kids that signed up that wanted to volunteer their time. And it was really interesting. And some unexpected outcomes from that. Some of the kids grew with the children, and then of course the moms would leave, and then my kids would say, well, what happened, or where did they go? Are they going to be safe? And they really developed a sense of respect for the world around them in situations that they might not be familiar with. I had one little boy from the class stay after school one day, and he popped in my room, who was in the book club, and he said, Mrs. Klein, can we talk? And I said, sure. I thought it was going to be about an extension for an assignment or something, and he ended up admitting and confiding in me that he had attempted suicide not once but 3 times, and it broke my heart. But to be able to have that sort of relationship and that level of comfort with the children that I was teaching, and to be able to help and support them, I don't think I ever would have gotten to that level had I not really listened to the kids and heard their voice and celebrated them and really took their passion and their curiosity and incorporate that into the curriculum. We were still talking about visualizing and making connections and inferring, but we did it in a way that really celebrated and honored their voice. So then when I taught middle school, we had a study hall. It was called Forum, and it was that we were on block scheduling. So it was every other day for the last 85 minutes of the day. And I had a lot of really wonderful kids in my class, and a lot of the really high kids. And they were just bored. Homework was already done. They didn't need this study hall. So they were not having fun. They were very upset because I had to ask them, well, can you help so-and-so with their work? And why do we always have to help the other kids? Like, why can't we just do what we want to do? So the principal's son was actually in my class. He's the one holding the paper. And he had this great idea. He said, can we just work on stuff that we want to work on? And I said, well, like what? What do you want to work on? And the football stadium at our school was actually getting a new building, but all the land around it was still dirt and it was just messed up. And they said, our building looks great, but we need landscaping. Like, we need flowers and we need grass. So can we do something to raise money to help the football team? And I said, that's a great idea. What are you going to do? So the football team got together and they decided to make jewelry. And I was like, this is fantastic. A bunch of guys making jewelry. I love it. And so these were really popular in the school. So they had to get some of the girls to teach them how to do it. So it was really great. The guys and the girls were collaborating, and they raised money to help put the landscaping down for their school, for their football stadium area. And some of the other projects, once the class found out that the boys were doing this, I had a group of girls say, Mrs. Klein, we want to do something. We want to do a project. And I said, well, what project do you want to do? And one of the little girls, her aunt was dying of cancer, and they wanted to raise money for her medical treatment. So the girls created a website, and they knew how to do it from the book club because they created a Weebly website. So they already knew how to do it and set that up, and they were inspired to, they hosted a walk to raise money around the track, and they really put a lot of information on the website to help inform other people. And they learned so much in the process too about how to deal and how to cope and what it actually means. And I was just overwhelmed with creativity of all the different projects that came out of that class. I had another small group in there who wanted to research. They just wanted to research more about being a vegetarian, so it was quite interesting, but they got that opportunity to do that. So it was really just what the kids wanted to do, and I just kind of fostered that and helped them and facilitate their learning. This girl is a senior, and what she did for one of her projects, she's a senior at our school, and her older sister in college always went to go help women in Peru, and these women are her own age, like high school students, but they had children, and what they would do is they would go over there and help these young mothers learn so that they could get better jobs and help advance themselves in their own personal lives. And so this was just a project that she started independently to really work on. And she now goes back every year, and in fact she's developing a curriculum for these young mothers in Peru. And she is at Harvard this year, and this was last year her project. But she went over there and she found that developmentally and in their mindset, these young mothers who were often raped by their own family members, and then their family members, the men in their family, they couldn't stand up to them because they were often the breadwinners, and you don't stand up to them. So because they had children and they were left by themselves, so they're in this shelter. So developmentally, they were very damaged in a way that you couldn't really expose them to some of the content that they should be learning. It had to be in a very childlike friendly way. So she started developing curriculum that was really safe and almost in a cartoon fashion that was just really comfortable for them to learn. Just basic addition and subtraction facts. And so she's continuing her work with that, and she goes, I think, 3 times a year to work with these mothers. And they do some sort of online program as well, and where she connects with them and really helps them. So I thought that was fantastic. And inspired by her story and just being able to have that voice as a student to be able to do that. And then another little boy, you might have seen this video, it's been all over Twitter a number of years ago, but a lady by the name of Joanne had contacted me, and she said, Erin, have you heard of Sully and his story? And I said, no, I haven't. And she's like, well, I've been sharing it on Twitter, and I think that this would be right up your alley for what you're interested in. And I said, so what has he done, or what is he doing? And he was bullied as a child, and she has Genius Hour in her classroom, or that 20% time. And what it is she does it every Friday, and that's what a lot of people do. So on that Friday, they get to work on projects of their own interests, and she kind of fosters that. So she said, let me just share his project with you and share what he did, and I think that you'll be inspired. So this is Sully's story. And this is the video, or the culminating project that he did.
Why does my heart feel so bad? Why does my soul feel so bad? Why does my heart feel so bad?
In fourth grade, I got picked on for being slow and clumsy. I was picked last for teams, laughed at in gym, and called names at recess. I was angry and sad a lot, and I felt alone. But that year helped me to see that I wasn't alone. A lot of kids get picked on and excluded, just for being different. And I made it my mission to reach out to those kids, the lonely, rejected, and unpopular ones, and to speak life.
Some days the tongue gets twisted. Other days my thoughts just fall apart. I do, I don't, I will, I won't. It's like I'm drowning in the deep. Well, it's crazy.